Is America running low on precision munitions? Well, America just fired billions of dollars worth of the most irreplaceable missiles at Iran. And the production lines that build replacements? Well, they've been running at peacetime rates. Meanwhile, Beijing and Moscow are watching every single launch and doing the math. What do you think, Vlad? Are you doing the math? Hey, snap out of it, boyo. This guy. He's watching and waiting. We need to make sure this piece of doesn't do anything crazy because now he knows we're getting low on precision munitions. All right, face. Let me get out of here. All right. Here's the question nobody in Washington wants to answer out loud. What happens to American deterrence when the expensive stuff starts running thin? Stick with me because by the end of this video, you're going to understand this situation better than most members of Congress. Let's go. Hey friends, Wes here, Army and Air Force veteran and really bad Russian speaker because mudro izuchat protivnika. And today, I'm going to tell you something the Pentagon really wishes I wouldn't. Congress has mandated that the United States military must, at any moment, be capable of fighting a two-front expeditionary war anywhere in the world. Fight Iran, support Ukraine, deter China, keep NATO calm simultaneously. That's the design. But in the opening 48 hours of Operation Epic Fury, the Pentagon fired more than 2,000 munitions at nearly 2,000 Iranian targets at a cost of roughly $5.6 billion US in the first 2 days alone. That burn rate was intense right out of the gate.
Confidence is high. I repeat, confidence is high.
Now, Trump posted on Truth Social that America has a virtually unlimited supply of weapons. To be fair, there's no way he was talking about precision munitions. He was almost certainly talking about conventional iron bombs and JDAM guidance kits. And yes, we have warehouses full of those. But conventional bombs only work once you have air superiority. Until then, you're going to do what Russia does, lobbing munitions from outside threat range and hoping for the best. The expensive precision stuff, the missiles, that's a completely different inventory. And the Pentagon is openly discussing invoking the Defense Production Act, a Korean War-era emergency law that forces manufacturers to prioritize government orders. You don't invoke wartime production powers when your stockpiles are unlimited. You invoke them when the math gets uncomfortable. Here's the structural problem, and it predates this administration by 3. Retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery said it best. Quote, "We did marginal to minimum purchases every year and hoped we didn't get caught out in the open, and we did." End quote. Republican budgets, Democrat budgets, didn't matter. The Pentagon bought just enough to keep production lines warm, never enough to build a deep magazine for a sustained multi-theater war. Now you might be asking yourself, why? Well, the 1990s saw a massive military drawdown after the Cold War ended, then the global war on terror kicked off, and fighting non-peer adversaries in Afghanistan and Iraq doesn't require stockpiles of exquisite high-end interceptors. You don't need a THAAD battery to chase the Taliban. And here's the part that really stings. America used to have allies. Alliance warfare shares the munitions burden across the coalition, but when you go to war alone, or with one partner, the math changes fast. And I hate math. That's why I went to law school. But even I can see this arithmetic is ugly. One more thing before we get into specific weapon systems, and this is where it gets really interesting. Be skeptical of anyone claiming to know exact current inventory numbers. Those figures are classified. What we can do is read the signals, the procurement rates, the congressional behavior, and the analyst warnings, and the operational pattern shifts. Those signals are screaming right now. So let's go system by system. Tomahawk first, because it's the cleanest story. The Tomahawk cruise missile is America's opening move in every major air campaign since the Gulf War. Range beyond 800 miles, cost about $1.3 million per shot. In 2003, the U.S. fired roughly 800 Tomahawks in the opening days of Iraq. The current Iran campaign has almost certainly consumed a significant chunk of available stocks. The U.S. is thought to have around 4,000 in inventory, or was before Iran. So here's the procurement math. The Navy budgeted 72 Tomahawks in fiscal year 2025. That dropped to only 57 Tomahawks in fiscal year 2026. It takes up to 2 years to build one from contract to delivery. Now, RTX has confirmed to ramping up production to over 1,000 per year, but those are framework agreements, not signed contracts. And then we talk about THAAD. Now, THAAD is where the nightmare starts. Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, the upper tier of America's ballistic missile shield. About 25% of the entire THAAD stockpile was estimated to have been consumed defending Israel from Iran during last summer's 12-day conflict. That was before Operation Epic Fury. The Pentagon signed a framework with Lockheed Martin to quadruple THAAD production from 96 to 400 interceptors per year, over 7 years. Iran has been firing missiles for 12 days. 7 years versus 12 days, that gap is the entire problem. And then we talk about SM-3 and SM-6. They are the Navy's layered answer to ballistic missiles fired from Aegis ships, engaging threats earlier in the flight path before the Patriot and the THAAD even get a shot. CSIS published a specific warning about depleting SM-3 and SM-6 inventories in late 2025. Now, that report is being cited in urgent tones in the context of Operation Epic Fury. Congress has approved multi-year procurement authority for SM-6, which is Washington's polite way of waving a red flag. Then there's the Patriot PAC-3, the system everyone wants and nobody has enough of. Ukraine wants it, the Gulf needs it, Taiwan is watching the inventory, Japan is watching, every NATO ally bordering Russia is watching, and as of this week, Trump even moved a Patriot battery out of South Korea over to the Middle East. South Korea is understandably furious. Secretary of State Rubio actually said the quiet part out loud. Iran is producing offensive missiles faster than the US can manufacture the interceptors to stop them. That is a stunning amount of truth from this administration, and it's exactly the exchange rate Iran is counting on. Then we get to the JASSM-ER and the LRASM, the Air Force and Navy's premier long-range, low-observable strike missiles. We don't have public inventory counts, but what we have is Congress approving multi-year procurement authority for both during an active shooting war. That's not a routine budget action, that's an admission that current stocks are insufficient, and the fix requires a commitment beyond a single budget cycle. Now, here's what is probably fine. As I mentioned before, conventional iron bombs and JDAM kits exist in deep stocks. Once air defenses are suppressed, the campaign can shift toward cheaper, more abundant iron munitions. The limiting factor was never the bombs themselves, it was the missiles that made it safe to drop them. And here's what Russia and China are actually looking at, because this is where the story leaves the spreadsheet and enters the realm of genuine strategic danger. Neither adversary needs the United States to run out of weapons, they just need the United States to become uncertain about its ability to sustain high-tempo operations across multiple theaters at once. Uncertainty changes deterrence. Deterrence changes behavior. Adversaries start probing. The Cato Institute put it plainly. The United States is equipped to support a one-war planning construct. Right now, the U.S. is fighting a war in Iran, supporting Ukraine, maintaining deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, and now we have special forces on the ground in Ecuador with the Ecuadorian government's permission. That is a four-war construct running on a one-year inventory. A Heritage Foundation study found the initial U.S. munition stockpile would run out within 25 days of a high-intensity conflict with China. 25 days against the pacing threat. The scenario the entire force structure is supposedly organized around. Now, Russia sees an opening for gray zone escalation in Europe while Washington is occupied. I would watch for this. More airspace violations, more maritime harassment, more drone campaigns against Ukrainian cities, not because Russia thinks it can beat NATO directly, but because stretched adversaries make mistakes, and mistakes create opportunities. China is running the cold, hard math. How many days can the US sustain high-end missile defense over Taiwan before it starts rationing shots? That used to be an unknown variable. Thanks to Operation Epic Fury, it is now an estimated number sitting in a Beijing intelligence assessment. So what do you watch for as this unfolds? I would say 3 signals. First, supplemental appropriations request from the White House. When that hits Congress, it's the public confirmation of what closed-door briefings have been saying privately, that we need munitions now. Second, surge contracts and multi-year procurement expansions beyond what's already been announced. Breaking Defense has already reported approvals for 8 separate missile families. Each one is a slow-motion industrial mobilization. And third, theater relocation decisions. The South Korea Patriot move already happened. If more THAAD or Patriot batteries start sliding out of the Pacific and into CENTCOM, That's a stockpile stress becoming a global risk trade in real time. Okay, let's take a breath. The United States is not out of weapons. What is true, America fired a significant portion of its most critical, hardest to replace munitions in the opening phase of a war whose duration is undefined. The White House is considering a Korean War emergency law to fix next year's problem. Defense executives got summoned to an urgent meeting. Lawmakers are getting briefed in tones that don't sound casual. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Judd Crane said the risk mitigations, changing shot doctrine, substituting cheaper munitions, all that stuff will relieve inventory stress, but introduce additional risk. And that risk is not borne by the procurement officer who signed the underfunded budget. It's borne by the service member flying the mission with one less interceptor and the battery behind them. 3 administrations bet that peacetime procurement levels would hold if the bad thing never happened. Well, the bad thing happened. Iran. You cannot deter 3 theaters simultaneously on a just-in-time Amazon Prime logic inventory model applied to missiles. Missiles don't care about your estimated delivery date. The magazine is not empty, but it is, however, no longer infinite. And in deterrence, the moment an adversary stops believing in your infinite, the moment they start feeling froggy. The question is, will they jump? Subscribe if you're feeling froggy yourself, because it's the best free way to support the channel and keeps me from selling my dad bod on OnlyFans. Don't nobody want to see that. And as always, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Crimea is Ukraine.